There is no red, white, or blue in this country. The only color that matters is green, because we live in the United Corporations of America. Good afternoon, greetings, salutations. It is Monday, March 24th, 2025, in the United Corporations of America, where Emperor Musk reigns. And MSNBC, holy cow, a decade later is suddenly a bunch of Bernie bros and gals. Look at that. Joining me now, the incomparable Zeynab, author of the Bullhorn Bulletin, which is a great Substack. You got to subscribe. The link is in the description. She's also been doing more videos and work for Status Coup. So check out the great video she did yesterday. And her mic wasn't even working, but it was still damn good.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
That's okay. I heard you. And I have hearing problems. So you did a great video yesterday. You know, obviously, Bernie, there was some conflicting responses because he had an interview with Hassan. I forget what's his last name?
Hassanabi.
Piker.
Oh, that's what he goes by, so yeah. Might as well.
Anyway, Bernie kind of poo-pooed doing a third party in an answer to Hassan. So
Hassan Piker.
Yeah. So a lot of people didn't like that, but you actually did a deep dive because you've been inside both ends. You were with Justice Democrats, brand new Congress, so you were there during that let's run progressives within the Democratic Party wave, but you also were executive director of when it was, well, I don't know if it was ever really legit, but anyway, you were executive director of People's Party, and you were overseeing trying to get ballot access. So you kind of know all the obstacles and all the monkey wrenches thrown at third-party candidates. So we'll talk more about that later, but definitely folks should check out the video because it's fine. I'm for a third party, but I'm also not for bullshitting you. We need to know what are the real chances of a third party actually working. And maybe a more in the middle right now is what Bernie was saying, which is let's just run a lot of candidates as independents.
And when they say independent, they don't mean like progressive Democrats. I mean, they mean as registered independent candidates, unaffiliated with any party. Yeah. And so, one of the things, and I'm not going to go into it in any length of time, but a lot of people don't realize two major things that we talk about in that video. And one is that 70% of seats were uncontested, meaning no challenger. So no one ran against them this cycle. 70% of seats across the country down ballot had no one running against them. The second thing is ballot access is different in every single state. The rules are outrageous. So it could take, like in Kentucky, you have to wait every 4 years and get 20% of the presidential vote to start a third party in Kentucky. So we kind of talk about that too, because a lot of people, the news doesn't tell us this stuff.
Right. So definitely check out that video. We posted it yesterday. It's a good. I actually learned some stuff. I was listening to it this morning. So a couple things to get to. Couple things. We got all of a sudden, Colin, what did I text you Friday? I was like, do not lose these clips. MSNBC is airing full Bernie Sanders live streams. I was both amused and fucking pissed off. And I'll tell you why in a minute. So we have clips of MSNBC primetime morning. There's suddenly Bernie bros, right? A decade later when he's not a threat to their parent company or their bottom lines. Isn't that interesting? We also have, it seems every hour the Trump administration is doing something illegal, but his ICE director just openly said to hell with due process. So at least they're not really like hiding it. In an interview, he was asked, what about these so-called gang members you're deporting en masse? Due process? And his answer was, well, what was Laken Riley's due process? Not really connected. I mean,
No, because then you're talking about every single crime that ever happened. You could make that argument for.
Right, exactly. So we'll get to that. We also have Gavin Newsom, in addition to cradling Steve Bannon's balls on his podcast, which is pretty grotesque. I don't know who's advising his presidential campaign, because he's obviously already launched his 2028 presidential campaign. In addition to cradling Bannon's balls, who did he have on also? Michael Savage?
No, he had on Charlie Kirk.
Okay. He's also sending out burner phones. Burner phones, like when you're committing crimes, not even committing crimes. I mean, journalists sometimes use burner phones with sources, but he's sending out burner phones to executives. Really, really bizarre. So bizarre that Zeynab's dogs are angry about it. He's setting up burner phones to tech executives at the same time that Northern California residents are still violently sick from the massive lithium battery plant fire that has sickened over 50 miles of people in Northern California, also contaminated the soil there, which I'll remind you, if you don't know that story, we'll get to that. Okay, let's start, Zeynab. I want to play a short clip from 9 years ago. This man was a young whippersnapper. I believe he was 9 years ago, would make me 29, maybe 30. This is me reporting from Washington Square Park in New York City, where Bernie Sanders had a massive, it was Woodstock for burners, okay, rally during the 2016 primary. Inside the park, 28,000 people. With the overflow outside the park, estimates had it at 40,000 people, okay? Colin, let's play some.
Hey, it's Jordan with TYT Network here in beautiful Washington Square Park, downtown Manhattan. There's going to be a shit ton of people here for Bernie Sanders in a little bit.
He's the only politician in this race that's bringing the truth, just simply the truth. I mean, you got to play a little politics here and there, but for the most part, he's bringing out the truth of everything that's going on in this country, everything that's affecting the working people, the millennials who are coming up into society that need an infrastructure in order to grow. Social mobility, things like that.
Operations are affecting your life, like your everyday life. There's people on the top just playing the lines.
Is Brooklyn in the house? I'm for Bernie for Brooklyn. He's the most progressive person we have running for the President of the United States of America. Got to represent primary April 19th.
Who literally walked with Martin Luther King to be our president. New York. We're going to make that happen.
The Democratic Party is becoming more and more Republicrat. Bernie will turn the Democratic Party back into the Democratic Party.
So I flipped around there. I mean, honestly, I've covered pretty big events. You can't really put into words the energy and the mood. There was just love. And when you have that many people, I mean, 40,000 people inside and outside the park, you would kind of think, considering CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times are all like a couple blocks up, maybe they'd be airing it live, parts of it live, maybe cover it at all. Crickets. Absolute crickets. When the man was saying the exact same thing he's saying now on his Fight Oligarchy tour, which we had Tina Desiree Berg cover one of his rallies with AOC in Las Vegas last week. Go check out those videos.
Yeah, that was great coverage.
I set that up as a backdrop, not so you could see me and my really ugly sideburns.
Hey, we had less gray back then, Jordan.
That is true. That was almost a decade ago. But so you could see he had more people out at that rally than at the rallies he had a lot of people out in Vegas and Phoenix and Colorado these last few days, but they totally ignored it. And when I say totally ignored it, I mean hid from the public, including the normie Dems, including, a lot of the establishment independent voters, Republican voters. They hid from the masses a massive political movement, a massive political moment where a lot of people did not know that Bernie Sanders was drawing that kind of crowd, didn't know the cross-section of people that were supporting him. He had impressive surrogates. And why I bring that up, Now, in response to Trump, and I think the F word could now be used, this is fascism, what's going on. What Trump is doing is unprecedented. I'm not going to do this false equivalence. As bad as Biden is, as bad as the Democrats are, we've hammered them for years. They weren't doing this kind of shit. So I think we could say this is another level. Honestly, that's the facts. But I just noticed something last week. All of a sudden, MSNBC started airing Bernie rallies live almost 5, 6, 10 minutes at a time. Colin, play the first one.
Which one?
Whichever one you got first. Was it Ali Velshi?
Oh,
We are the wealthiest nation in the history of this world.
All right, we're going to continue to monitor this rally. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Bernie Sanders are in Tempe, Arizona, at a remarkable rally with a lot of people in it. This is akin to these town halls that we've been seeing. Well, their idea is they've got this fight oligarchy thing, and they're going into places that voted Republican to try and rally people around the idea of stopping what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing. Now, we got a good friend of ours inside that rally right now, so we're going to Tempe, Arizona. NBC News political reporter, my colleague Nnamdi Egwuonwu is there. Nnamdi, give me a sense of what's going on outside of what we can see. It looks like a pretty big crowd. And Bernie Sanders made a reference to the fact that there are still people who couldn't get into it.
Yeah, Ali, you referenced some of the other Democratic town hall events we're seeing. Let me tell you how this event differs. This event is much larger. It's eerily familiar to the campaign rallies we saw former Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz hold last fall. Thousands of people here. This venue has a capacity of about 5,000 people, and it's completely full. There are people outside. We're talking about lines that wrapped around a parking deck. So you're seeing that similar degree of enthusiasm. And a lot of the people I touched and many of these voters just wanted a progressive Democratic representative in the upcoming election.
Do something about this and going into the Lion's Den. Remarkable rally.
So that was the first clip, and that's only some of it. Ali Velshi, he aired some of it, just went live to it for 5, 6, 7 minutes at a time. Remember, CNN and MSNBC in 2016, they were airing Donald Trump's empty podium, an empty podium.
Yeah, I remember.
Sometimes for 10, 15 minutes, showing his empty podium with a bunch of pundits talking. So you might say, Jordan, who cares? Well, the point is they're hopping on the Bernie train when they start seeing the political wins, and maybe some normie Dems are starting to finally, have a eureka moment where Tina interviewed a couple normie Dems that were suddenly fed up with the Democratic Party and starting to speak Bernie's language. Better late than never, I guess. But Zeynab, before we get to the Morning Joe crowd, what are your thoughts on MSNBC of all places? They pushed the Bernie Bros stuff very hard. They pushed him as a racist, a sexist. This is not to relitigate things, but I think it matters because it kind of shows you this is manufacturing consent. They hid this when it was a threat, but now when he's 83, he's not running for president again, we don't think. They love it, apparently.
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think we're probably seeing a little bit of a battle of the, people that pull the strings, because you've got one part of the oligarchy that wants to take over, consolidate everything, and pull everything in a monopoly, and you've got another part of the oligarchy that is going to be left out of this, even when Trump takes, it to the extent he's going to take it to. I think the second thing is that, the energy is here. They're seeing the down halls. They're seeing what's happening. So they're starting to cover this. The Democratic Party isn't doing shit. I mean, what rallies are they doing? What organizing are they doing? What boycotts? What, anything. And their approval rating is at what? Between less than 20% to 25% most. Like, they've tanked. They've crashed out. So I think that's part of why they're actually covering these rallies right now. And there's not if this was a presidential race and their milquetoast neoconservative person with the Democratic label slapped on them was running, they probably still wouldn't cover it. Even if it was dire, even if there was, tanks rolling in the street, they might not cover Bernie. And I'm not being hyperbolic. If this was a presidential election and their neocon was running, that's who they would be following around. Even if they had a crowd size of 500, Jordan, that's just the truth. They'll cover it in the off season, but they're not going to cover it when there's actually any challenge to power.
But it gets even more amusing and infuriating, in my opinion. Morning Joe, who cradled Donald Trump's balls for most of 2015 and 2016. You remember they had Donald Trump calling in to the show 2-3 times a week. There was that clip of them in between a commercial of their interview, like joking around, like, hey, let's, Trump like, yeah, let's make me look good here. And then, of course, Joe and Mika were laughing. They were Team Hillary. And then in 2020, anybody but Bernie. They are also suddenly airing Bernie Sanders rallies and speaking relatively favorable for the cocktail crowd cabal that's usually on set there. Colin, let's play some of that.
That is not democracy. And our fight is to make sure that we remain a democracy. One person, one vote, not billionaires buying elections.
Lisa, I want to talk about the populism that we saw with Bernie Sanders, and you were saying it's so funny. You were saying while you were watching it, what Simone said, which is, people trust him because, this is what he's been saying. I mean,
for decades.
For decades, and we just heard Steve Bannon's name mentioned there. What's so incredible is that there's a lot that you hear from the left in populism that you hear from the Steve Bannon wing on economic populism about, tax cuts for the rich not being the right thing and actually breaking up monopolies being the right thing to do. It's very interesting.
Interesting. Joe Scarborough with a little glitter in his eye about Bernie's populism. Again, as a rule,
knowing he's going to crush it if it actually builds.
As a rule of thumb, I try not to relitigate things from 10 years ago, but I do think it's relevant because it just shows you, yes, corporate media and its influence and power, thankfully, it has been diminishing. However, as I always have to point out, and some viewers get mad because they think I'm talking about them, the bottom line is the most consistent voter in America, unfortunately, Zeynab, correct me if I'm wrong, is still older voters. They come out for midterms. They come out for every local election. They come out in off-election years like this year for governor's races. They'll come out for a state Supreme Court race, right? They definitely come out for presidential elections. And most older voters, this is the demographic of definitely Fox News, definitely MSNBC, definitely CNN. Now, there's plenty of older boomers that are with it and watch independent media and have not watched CNN or any of this trash for years. But I could tell you, having been on the ground, I could tell you, having been on the ground and interviewing a lot of older folks, a lot of their talking points come straight out of the mouth of Morning Joe or Rachel Maddow or, name your CNN gas bag, and of course, Fox News. So it is relevant that it shows you, if this man, Bernie Sanders, we used to have something called the fairness doctrine where you had to show equal time for candidates, right? If this man would have had a fair shake, would have had equal coverage, if his rallies would have got even 7 to 10 minutes live in 2016, even, I think, a tenth, 25% of the coverage of Donald Trump, I think it would have potentially changed history because most of his policies were aligned with even a lot of normie Dems. The problem was normie Dems were fed this steady diet of propaganda and bullshit by Morning Joe and CNN and the rest of them that this guy was radical or the elusive swing voter was turned off by free healthcare, even though the polls say otherwise. The elusive swing voter or independent voter was turned off by free college or, thought the word socialism, even though by the polls, he always did very, very well than his opponent. He did better than his opponents among independents and conservative voters. So it just shows you that essentially these people are all like fake journalists with makeup on that will do a blackout of candidates when those candidates actually could threaten power. And then if those candidates have no threat at all, I mean, he's having big rallies, but he's not a political threat. He's 83. It's just not practical that he's going to run for president again. Suddenly, MSNBC sees where the wind is going. MSNBC sees even a lot of their audience is starting to jump onto the Bernie wave, starting to get fed up with the spineless shit fucks in the Democratic Party. They're airing Bernie's streams. They're also talking, I didn't mention it, AOC spoke at these rallies. They're speaking relatively favorable of her too. I think it shows you, Zeynab, how insidious the corporate hijacking of media is. And it's not just cable news, it's print, it's digital, it's even some podcasts. Most of them are there to push narratives and on the other side, suppress popular movements.
Yeah, and it's some sheep herding too. Because I haven't heard Morning Joe. There's a little bit of criticism, but I haven't heard a whole lot of criticism from them about the fecklessness of the Democratic Party. But then they're like, oh, look, some Democrats are still doing things and 50,000 people are showing up. Our party's still relevant. And I think that's part of it. When it comes to that, but they're the only people that are doing anything. So they have to show that the Democratic Party is doing something.
Right. And lastly, he's less relevant, I guess, because he got fired from CNN. But Don Lemon, he's still out there. He has a YouTube channel. I just thought this one was funny because on CNN, I mean, he was constantly shitting on Bernie. He was saying the country's not where Bernie Sanders is. All of a sudden now he's sitting there stroking his cat, literally, on his little YouTube show. He's now independent media, which is a joke.
Well, Jordan, he said that 2 weeks ago that the everyone was too radical, that right. Kamala was too radical. She should have moved more to the center.
Well, apparently Bernie gets 35,000. Apparently Bernie gets 35,000 in Colorado. Bernie gets 20,000 something in Phoenix. By the way, we should point out, and Zeynab, you could talk about this better than I. It is 2025. There's no presidential election. There's no Senate election. There's no Congress election. I mean, there's one that I could think of, high-profile governor's election. It's very hard. Most people are recovering from the last cycle. I can't think of another example where there's been these kind of rallies with this many people coming out in an off election year. It's hard. You're an organizer. It's hard to get hundreds of people to show up somewhere, let alone tens of thousands, just to hear you basically give the same recycled speech you've gave for the last 20 years. So it's pretty big. That I'm not saying this is a Bernie bro. I'd be saying this if it was Pete Buttigieg, who I can't stand. I mean, the fact that he's doing this, it would almost be criminal journalistically for them to ignore it. So at least they're not ignoring it. But I want to show Don Lemon, who all of a sudden, he went from, remember when he said, pick up your pants to black kids?
Yeah.
And he went to, I'm not a progressive, I'm kind of an independent. Now let's hear him on Bernie.
Let's take you to the rally now. We'll get to that. Don't worry about it. Let's take you to the rally now. Let's go to Bernie Sanders at this rally in the amphitheater. 50,000 people, not even an election year. We barely just got past the election that happened in November. Bernie Sanders, we are not a poor country, but you are treated like we are. Now, didn't I just say this the other day? I didn't know Bernie Sanders was going to say that. I said we live in the richest country in the world with the most resources. When did it become bad to help people and to look out for our fellow men and our neighbors and our people, even who don't live in America? Why is shutting down USAID a bad thing when it helps so many people around the world? Isn't that Christian values? Isn't that just doing unto others? Bernie Sanders.
If we were a poor country, I would come before you and I'd say, I'm sorry that you got to work 50 hours a week. I'm sorry that you really have to do dangerous and dirty work. I am sorry that you can't afford to send your kid to college. I'm sorry that the elementary school your kid goes to is inadequate, or that you can't afford childcare. But we're a poor country. We just can't afford that. We are not a poor country.
Thank you, Bernie.
There is no excuse in God's earth that people have to make a choice between food and the medicine they need to stay alive.
He's right. God, I mean, what? I never thought of myself like as this crazy, raging progressive. I am a Christian. But now I feel like, I guess in the Republicans' terms, maybe I'm a progressive. Because I think we should be doing as much as possible.
Holy cow!
To help people. People are finally listening to Bernie.
Don Lemon has found Jesus. Hallelujah.
Here comes the loaves and fishes, finally.
He said,
oh, man.
He's listening to Bernie. Thank you, Bernie. Well, were you not a Christian 9 years ago on CNN, Don? He was saying the same thing. Or were you just not allowed to say this?
He's like, I didn't know Bernie was going to say that. The one thing that he says over and over and over again.
You know, Zeynab, listen, if we want to build out the movement, we have to be open to Johnny-come-latelys. I'm totally fine with those that evolve. But there's a difference between those that are seeing the light genuinely. Welcome. We want to widen the tent, not in, corporate Democrat speak of we're a big tent so we could have, those that believe in Medicare for all and those that are purchased, by the for-profit healthcare system. I'm not talking about opening the tent that wide, but we could have folks that are more moderate, but all believe in the same values, folks that are starting to see, hey, maybe populist progressive value policies are
right.
Yeah. But I'm not welcoming Don Lemon into my tent because this is not genuine or Morning Joe or all these fucks. This is, hey, I'm going where the wind is now, because it's not only the lefties that we could institute our media blackout on. Now it's our viewers. What's that?
But this reminds me of in our independent media space. This reminds me of like the Jimmy Dores and the TUITs that all of a sudden went toward Trump. Jimmy's been doing it for a while because that's where the money's at, and then TUIT started doing it during the election, and then a lot after the election since Trump won, going and shifting right. Because that's where the money is. These people from CNN, MSNBC they shifted to the right during the election. They shifted to the right directly after Trump. Don Lemon did a whole episode about why woke made Kamala lose, which was absolutely bonkers. And then a week later turns around and goes, I didn't know Bernie was saying these things. That ain't authentic. I'm sorry. No.
And by the way, when he's saying, he's not wrong when he's saying, these are Christian values, do unto others. And this is all that. This is what the man's been saying for 40 years, Don. Did you have Google at CNN? Like, why is this a surprise? You're acting like you've just learned this is what the man stands for. Not just the man. Forget Bernie. This is what a lot of the candidates that Don Lemon poo-pooed as the squad, and he poo-pooed them. And it's not just Don Lemon. It's been other people at CNN too. Chris Cuomo when he was there. So you would have to truly believe that this man was, asleep all day, or his producers didn't inform him, or he was so busy he could not just watch a Bernie Sanders rally. The things he's saying, thank you, Bernie, to now, and he's talking about why not, try to help those, on a lower ring of society. This is all the things that in the past he would call radical. He called, too left. It alienates. But now, Bernie's, bringing out Mick Jagger level crowds. It's all good. Why? Maybe because he has a YouTube channel now and he doesn't have the stable salary from CNN. So he's kind of riding where SEO and the algorithm takes him. I mean, we know that's how a lot of people are doing it these days. I just find it's on one end kind of humorous, but on another end really infuriating. Because for me, you know, I covered a lot of Bernie rallies and I covered a lot of Trump rallies in 2016. Bernie rallies Trump rallies were big. I don't want to minimize it. He would get 10,000, 20,000 at some of them, but Bernie rallies were bigger. But you would not know that by any of the coverage because they never showed it. And when they did show it, it wasn't really to focus on the energy, the movement. I would be out there in the crowd at these rallies when I worked for TYT interviewing Bernie supporters. And I would look back and the press stage where all the media was, the reporters, all of the reporters were standing on the press, what they call the press riser. So you have the tripods and the cameras are on top and they're shooting the rally. They weren't out in the crowd interviewing supporters. They didn't care to. They would say, oh, we're on a tight timeline because we're traveling with the campaign. They could have came out and interviewed people. They were disinterested because their networks didn't want to actually show it. They didn't want to speak to supporters. They didn't want to show how the winds were shifting. But now suddenly they do. And I think, to tell you the truth, what they're trying to do, they're trying to sheep herd. They're trying to give Bernie his flowers now and praise Bernie, but then take all those people that are out there and direct them to Pete Buttigieg. Direct them to Gavin Newsom. Direct them to name your, you know, maybe it'll be Chris Murphy, the senator from Connecticut, who's now making moves, who sound kind of more populist now. But I got news for you. I mean, I can't speak to all of the folks out there, but Colin, if you have the clip, Tina interviewed. I mean, if you Google dictionary definition of normie Democrat, this guy would come up. Tina was at the Bernie rally in Las Vegas. We aired the whole thing live. We have other interviews we posted over the weekend, so check those out. And she interviewed, he calls himself a moderate Democrat. He had a resist shirt on. I'm sure he was kind of with the original resistance of Trump 1.0. Well, I mean, hear what he had to say. This was at the Bernie rally.
I'm furious. Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. I have been a lifelong Democrat. I've been a Democrat since the 70s. Long time. And I am done with that. I am what you used to consider a moderate. And I'm still the same person. They changed. Schumer changed. This resist means something. Resist. That's my attitude. Fight back. And Schumer, I'm done with. The only way it's recoverable is for us. I cannot count on my senators. The House stood up and did their thing. Senators aren't going to stand up for us. Cortez Masto didn't. I think it's left to us. I've given up on them as being an out.
I mean, listen, if we sat down for coffee or a beer, maybe we don't agree on everything, but it sure sounds he's closer to the Bernie left than the Pelosi Schumer right. And that's a lot of the normies now. The MSNBC viewers, you know, the folks that watch PBS, the folks that read the New York Times, they might still need a little convincing in terms of Medicare for all or a little softening of the word socialism because they came up in like the 70s and the 80s where it was all propagandized and socialism became a boogeyman. But a lot of these normies, their viewers, Don Lemon's traditional viewers and Morning Joe's traditional viewers, they're coming over to Bernie. Forget the policy for a second, because he's actually fighting because he doesn't have any donors that he has to appease. He doesn't have any donors that he has to get their permission before putting out a policy, or he could only go so far, or it's going to alienate his donors because his policies they don't like. And I just find it, people need to realize, and this is not just, we're not, you know, to people already on the left and who were Bernie, I'm not breaking news to you, but I think we have more newer viewers. I have found we have newer viewers who have tuned out from MSNBC and traditional media are tuning in here. We have some MAGA types who watch. People need to realize whether it's MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, it's infotainment. It's corporate infotainment. This is not news. if it was news, they would have been airing 40,000 people in Washington Square Park for Bernie Sanders. Didn't have to air the whole thing, but they should have covered those types of things. And I can tell you, because I covered probably 30 or 40 Bernie rallies, they were not showing most of them. They were not covering most of them. They were not interviewing people. When they were covering Bernie, it was to push that his supporters are racist, sexist, and all the rest of it.
And there's one other thing, Jordan. When you talk about policy, I've organized in 18 states. I've knocked doors in 9 states. I've talked to tens of thousands of voters. I've done interviews. I've done the research. I talked to normies. I talked to all kinds of people, and we're actually not that far away on policy. I've even talked to conservatives. I'm not talking about like MAGA, diehard Trump supporters or as extreme as some people have gotten now. But most people want education for their kids paid for by our tax dollars. Most people want health care for everybody. Most people agree. Most of the country wants tuition-free K through 12. They also want early childcare. They want family paid leave. All of these things are extremely popular. And, people like Don Lemon or whoever else have been lying. This guy that's a moderate, if you sat down with him, I can't read his mind, and I'm not going to assume, but there's a good chance that a lot of these policies that I have mentioned, he would call himself a centrist and support all of those policies. But the people that shill for these corporations, at the mainstream media organizations like CNN and MSNBC don't want you to know it is popular. So now they're going to show you Bernie because, I think in part because they're afraid somewhat of this insane fascism that's been impacting the rest of us for 30 years is now finally going to come home to roost, maybe for them.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's part of it. But these policies are popular, actually. They are. And now they're getting uprooted. What little social safety nets we have are getting uprooted, and we're seeing the response to that.
I want to show you some of the, I guess you could say, corporate establishment's response. Dean Phillips, who ran, I guess he primaried Biden for 5 minutes. In fairness, like Marianne Williamson, like RFK when he ran as a Democrat, Dean Phillips was mostly ignored too. He, I think, bravely, even though I don't agree with him politically, did, stand up against Biden. He got ostracized and blackballed from the party as a result. Now he's not a congressman anymore. But he went on TV he doesn't recognize the Democratic Party anymore because Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, former vice presidential candidate with Kamala Harris, was basically gleefully saying, great, good that Tesla's stock is going down. Let's play Dean Phillips.
I really don't recognize my party. I don't recognize its.
Oh, I thought it was a longer clip. Basically, Dean Phillips was saying, I don't recognize my party. The governor is sitting here, praising Tesla's stock going down. Those are American jobs. Those are American workers. We should not be celebrating, Tesla sales going down or Tesla's stock price going down, yada, yada, yada. We should be celebrating American investment. Well, Dean, if I Googled it, did you say anything about Tesla and Elon Musk union busting their workers? I doubt it.
Of course not.
Did you say anything about Tesla breaking safety laws? I doubt it. When I say Tesla, I mean Elon Musk, not the workers. Of course, I'm sure there's plenty of good people that work at Tesla, but you're going to sit here and cry crocodile tears that I thought this was a free market in America. So if the CEO of a company does unpopular things that make that company enemy number one, if there's a customer boycott and sales go down and people trade in their Teslas or sell their Teslas, we're not talking about, the Molotov cocktails and putting them on fire. I'm just talking about people answering with their wallets.
Actual economic boycotts.
Yeah, actual economic boycotts. What? I thought we're a free market, because when the conservatives did it to Chick-fil-A, remember that? When conservatives and Mike Huckabee wanted to boycott Chick-fil-A because they did something pro-gay, I don't really remember. All the Republicans loved it. But now it's eco-terrorism. This is domestic terrorism, the Republicans are saying, these Tesla boycotts. And you have shills like Dean Phillips, I'm sorry, basically coming on here saying this is not the Democratic Party I grew up with. Well, it should be the Democratic Party, because the only way we're going to get anywhere is to hit them where it hurts, their wallets. And it's working. These Tesla protests are working. That's why you got the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. I did a video on it earlier, threatening an elected Congresswoman, Jasmine Crockett, for the temerity, the gall to say, let's take Elon Musk down. Not violently. She was pointing out what the economic protests. She's threatening criminal penalty against her, the Congresswoman. I just find it incredible.
Man, snowflakes.
I just find it incredible that all these people pretend there's a free market, but when the free market actually works against their own interests, tyranny, radical, terrorism. There's another one, Chris Coup.
Let me say this really quick. I think that what you're thinking of is when at the same time two things were happening. One, the conservatives were boycotting Starbucks because Starbucks didn't say Merry Christmas on their cups. The second thing is we, like the progressives and leftists and others and pro-LGBTQ rights people were boycotting Chick-fil-A because Chick-fil-A was creating labor or creating hiring practices that were strategically, and they were fighting to strategically discriminate hiring gay workers because they're quote unquote a Christian, business. And we were protesting Chick-fil-A, and the Republican all these conservatives were losing their damn minds over that.
Right.
Chick-fil-A stock was tanking, but at the same time, they were celebrating them boycotting Starbucks and hurting their profits because that was a liberal woke organization. So when it's an organization that just doesn't say Merry Christmas on their cups, oh my God, we're going to boycott it. An organization that doesn't want to hire people based on their sexuality. Well,
as a Jew, I'm leading the protest. Early boycott of Starbucks, Dunkin', and all of them that don't say Happy Hanukkah on their cups. Okay, it's ridiculous. But thank you for correcting me. I got it wrong on the Chick-fil-A. It was what you said. But
it just reminded me of the hypocrisy you were talking about too.
I wanted to show Chris Coons. He is basically Joe Biden's replacement. Once Biden left the Senate to become Obama's vice president, this guy became senator of Delaware, and he was asked about the Bernie energy from these rallies, and Bernie basically saying the Democratic Party is in bed with the billionaires. Let's play.
The Democratic Party has virtually no grassroots support.
So the Democratic Party has virtually no grassroots support. So I had a great event in Delaware this week with the whole congressional delegation, with folks who are families, patients, caregivers, to fight the upcoming cuts to Medicaid by Republicans. What unites the Democratic Party, what will mobilize the folks who are going to be impacted by huge cuts to Medicaid by the bill that is on its way through the House right now, is denying care to millions of Americans. I reject Senator Sanders' characterization of Democrats as in the pocket of billionaires. There are more billionaires in Donald Trump's cabinet than in any cabinet in history. Elon Musk, an unelected billionaire, the richest man on earth, is leading efforts to slash federal agencies. Clearly, the Democratic Party, after the last election, does have real work to do to prove that we hear and connect with working people in my home state of Delaware and
Zeynab,
across the country.
He rejects the characterization of the Democratic Party in the tank of billionaires, which is interesting considering it came out, a couple weeks after the election, that Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House, his response to Kamala Harris losing to the used car salesman was to go to Silicon Valley to beg billionaires not to flee the Democratic Party. Let me repeat, beg billionaires not to flee the Democratic Party. So, of course, we've already established Trump has the oligarchs at the table with him. Elon is the unelected emperor. Of course, the billionaires are right now playing footsie with Trump, but Democratic Party not in bed with the billionaires. Who was running Kamala?
I just looked something up, Jordan. Chris Coons his small individual contributions under $200 is only 4.52% of the money he's raised. His large individual donor contributions are 60.99%, and he's gotten $2.8 million in PAC money, and that does not count all these super PACs that have gotten behind people like Chris Coons and poured millions in to keep him in office. He's one of the bought out people. And I see some comments talking about Bernie and Israel. Understand, we have criticisms of Bernie too. We had plenty of criticisms on here when Bernie Sanders endorsed Joe Biden, when Bernie Sanders endorsed Hillary. We talked about it when he endorsed Hillary, when he folded. Plenty. We talked about it when he endorsed Kamala Harris. We have talked about this and we agree. And we have talked about his stances on Israel being soft. But this is we're talking about the economic message and the hypocrisy with the media with that message. This is not a rehabilitation tour we're doing for Bernie, just to be clear.
Yeah, I mean, listen, bottom line, I've taken it on all ends. I've had people say, Jordan, you're a Bernie bro, blah, 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 blah. If I defend him, and then I've had viewers unsubscribe when I've criticized him because I'm throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You can't please everyone. The bottom line is, listen, Bernie Sanders, he's not perfect. I am not on the Jimmy Dore universe, wherever that man is these days. I never bought into he's a sellout, he's a fraud, this, that, or the other thing. The bottom line is this man has been basically preaching the same thing for the last 50 years. Now, there's a difference between having strong convictions and having the will to actually start a revolution. Clearly, this man never had the will to actually start a political revolution. Now, you could look at that and say it's a weakness, or you could look at that and say it was nefarious. I don't think it was nefarious. I actually think he means what he says, but he was only willing to ever go up to a certain line. So you either choose to throw the baby out with the bathwater, totally disregard every good thing he has done. Because let's face it, there's a lot of people in this chat or watching right now that wouldn't have even gotten into politics if it were not for the Bernie Sanders movement. So to me, I don't think you have to love him or hate him. He's not God. You could criticize him. I criticized him throughout Biden's administration because he told us in 2020, hold your nose, vote for Biden to get rid of Trump, and then we're going to fight Biden on day one. Clearly, that day never came. And I did not agree with his strategy to basically work within the inside of the Biden administration because contrary to the spin, we didn't really get that much on the progressive left from Biden. He abandoned the few major things, $15 minimum wage, public option, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm also not going to say Bernie's a sellout. He's a fraud. He's with AIPAC. I mean, don't be ridiculous. So, hey, if you think he's a fraud and he's the worst thing, then you don't have to watch. It doesn't matter to me. But my point is, this black or white image a lot of people online have, it's just not reality. The man, whether you love him or hate him, name any other politician in Congress or the Senate that is even in his universe, ideology-wise, that has been willing to take the hate for the last 30 years, that has not taken the big donor money. I wish he would use this opportunity, and Zeynab, we talked about it last time, I wish he would be out at this Fight Oligarchy tour trying to start a third party. I've said that. I've been clear. I think now is the time to try and start a third party. Not that it'll be...
He's, on Gaza, there are things I criticize him on, but he is the only person in the Senate, the only person, and this isn't a defense, these are just facts. We are a news network. He is the only person in the Senate that starting way back in November of 2020, 2023, when this first started happening, wrote 3 different bills to stop arming Israel. The only one that tried to sanction Israel in the entire Senate was Bernie Sanders. And then eventually Rand Paul hopped on with him.
And by the way, he was the one who got a historic vote, bipartisan vote, to enact the War Powers Act to stop America's genocide in Saudi Arabia that Trump vetoed.
In Yemen, that's
They
right.
got it through Democrat and Republican side. That was Bernie Sanders, I believe, working with Senator Mike Lee. So there's plenty to criticize, but listen,
There's plenty to criticize, and then there's facts. You know,
well, we're talking
Yeah.
about, this is not like a, hey, bow down to Bernie hour. This is not about Bernie. He's doing the same thing he's been doing for 20 years. He's saying the same thing he's been saying. This is about these total frauds in the media. And by the way, it's not just cable news. There are people like digital news websites who were Bernie haters now suddenly riding the Bernie wave and praising his crowds. The same thing with AOC. If you want to talk about sellouts, I think AOC is a lot more of a sellout than Bernie ever was. I mean, this person, AOC, there's some good, but she has palled around a lot more inside the Democratic Party than Bernie has. She was giving some of her donor money to conservative Democrats. She came around and was kind of wish-washy on not challenging incumbent corporate Democrats anymore with progressive primaries. She would not endorse Nina Turner's congressional campaign until literally the day before the election. Literally the day before the election, AOC finally endorsed her when it was useless. So there's, to me, a lot more to criticize AOC on than Bernie. But putting that aside, make sure you keep your eyes on this media storm, because they are going to try and take this energy and say, thanks, Bernie. Now can you open for Pete Buttigieg? That's what's going to happen.
If Bernie shows up and he's out there when the media starts doing it, if Bernie starts doing it, then we'll call him out when they do. Isn't that right, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you can't please everyone. There's plenty of, there's always going to be Bernie haters, Bernie lovers. Like I said, I've gotten it from all ends. People calling me a Bernie bro, and then people saying, Jordan, stop criticizing Bernie. So we can't make content. You can't make content to please everyone. And when you do that, you might get short-term sugar highs, but eventually people leave because you're just chasing the current public sentiment. You got to say what you actually believe. Moving on. Due process has been in the news, Zaina. Due process because Trump is rounding up so-called gang members and deporting them without any due process or hearings or bringing them before a judge. Last week, he basically defied a judge, and then his administration put forward magical legal arguments like, well, we were already outside of U.S. airspace, so your ruling didn't matter anymore. But his ICE chief was on the Sunday shows yesterday, and he was asked basically, what about these people's due process? I guess you could give him credit because he didn't like bullshit around or try to pretend that the Trump administration is giving them due process. He just openly came out and said, well, fuck the due process. I mean, he didn't say that exactly, but that was the equivalent. Colin, if we could play that.
So how do you determine, or how do your people in the field determine that somebody is a gang member?
Look, there's various methods. I've noticed in the media this week, a lot of them don't have criminal histories. Well, a lot of gang members don't have criminal histories. Just like a lot of terrorists in this world, they're not in any terrorist database, right? We only know the information what's in databases based on, for instance, most terrorists we arrest that are identified by the U.S. government are later identified through a Title III investigation or through an undercover operation. They're not in any terrorist screening database. We know that. A lot of gang members, I started as a cop in 1984. Many gang members don't have a criminal history. So we have a count on social media. We have a count on surveillance techniques. We have a count on sworn statements from other gang members. We have a count on, wiretaps and Title IIIs. Everything involved with criminal investigations come into play. So just because someone hasn't been arrested and charged with a crime yet, doesn't mean they're a member of a gang.
But how do you? I mean, what we've heard from lawyers representing some of these people is that they deny that they're members of this gang. Or either, Tren de Aragua or MS-13. Do they get a chance to prove that before you take them out of the country and put them in to a notorious prison in a country that they're not even from? I mean, do they have any due process at all?
Confident. Look, due process. Where was Lake and Riley's due process? Where were all these young women that were killed and raped by members of TDA? Where was their due process?
Well, the people that did that should be prosecuted.
Alive on a subway. Where's her due process?
Well, sure.
The bottom line is that plane was full of people designated as terrorists. Number one. Number two, every Venezuelan migrant on that flight was a TDA member based on numerous criminal investigations, on intelligence reports, and a lot of work by ICE officers.
Well, if we want to use the what was Lake and Riley's due process, then I guess we should start saying where was George Floyd's due process? Where was Michael Brown's due process? Where was Leonard Peltier's due process in that sham trial? Thankfully, he's now finally freed after 50 years. What a fucking authoritarian, fascist thing to say. And they're trying to basically, by saying that, he's trying to prey on Lake and Riley, which stirs up the conservatives. Of course, you know, she was a young woman tragically murdered by an undocumented immigrant. I feel for her family, but what is that? I mean, what does that have to do with rounding up indiscriminately 200 people, claiming they're gang members through?
Her murderer is in jail, too. Right. I'm not saying that justifies it whatsoever, but there was due process in what happened after that horrific crime.
Right. And really what he's saying, remember, mama or dada, if you had decent parents, you know, raised you, 2 wrongs don't make a right. He's basically saying 2 wrongs make a right. He's basically saying, well, this woman was tragically killed, so fuck these people's due process. And by the way, part of the reason we want due process for these folks, well, threefold. Every day I'm reading more stories of Trump's ICE rounding up American citizens, not undocumented immigrants, American citizens they wrongly are rounding up and in some cases deporting, because the reality is for the quota that Trump is pounding his chest that he wants his people to meet to deport criminal undocumented, there's not enough criminal undocumented immigrants to meet that quota.
No, per capita, less crimes are committed by undocumented migrants per capita per 1,000 people than are committed by U.S. citizens. It's just a fact.
It's just Looney Tunes what's going on here. And when they say, he's basically saying, fuck the due process. Wait a minute, MAGA, if you're watching, wasn't this the law and order president? We need law and order. Proud Boys, what did he say? Proud Boys. Stand by, stand by, stand up, he said at the debate. Mm-hmm. Law and order. Let's release all the January 6ers. It seems like a very, very interesting definition of law and order here. And this is beyond a slippery slope, because you basically have this fascist thug, his ICE chief, who's just doing Trump's bidding. I'm sure Trump is loving it. Basically saying they don't deserve due process. They're not American citizens. Well, first of all,
there. This isn't a slippery slope. We've fallen off the cliff. Brown shirts. And I am not saying this happened. This did happen under Obama to a certain extent and under Biden. And I recognize that our immigration system has been abusive for decades now. The privatized immigration industrial complex has made hundreds of millions of dollars, if not close to billions at this point. But the reality is, you're exactly right. They are suspending habeas corpus. They're suspending the 4th Amendment. And one of the things that he said to me sent chills down my spine. And that is the thing that they keep saying. These people were labeled or considered terrorists. They were labeled terrorist. So you can label anyone. They say they're designated terrorist. You can designate literally anyone a terrorist and deport them. What else are they gonna? Trump has already came out and said that boycotting Tesla is violent. He's already called people boycotting Tesla, not just violent people. He said people boycotting Tesla and doing this to my sweet baby Elon. are terrorists, you know? So I had a
Zeynab, he's not calling them violent. He's not calling them violent. They're calling them terrorists.
Terrorist, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, he's saying people boycotting him, not just the violent, not just the people that are destroying property. Let me remind you, so far it's been property that is destroyed, you know, and you cannot like that. That's fine. I get that. Some people's cars who had nothing to do with anything have been, you know, written on or keyed and things like that. But so far, it's mostly been economic boycotts to Elon Musk's stock. That is the bulk of this. He has lost half his wealth, and they're labeling those boycotts domestic terrorism, not officially yet. They've said the violent people are domestic terrorists, but how far are they away from labeling anyone who boycotts that? So far, they've alluded to anyone that supports BDS, which has been long-standing, that they've called BDS, boycott, divestment, sanction for Israel. You know, pro-Palestine, people supporting Palestinian rights were terrorists. This has been long-standing. Now they're calling protesters of Palestine, or pro-Palestine protesters fighting against apartheid, terrorists. So how long is it before they start rounding us up and sending us all to El Salvador? They don't like what Status Coup publishes. Round us up. Send us to El Salvador. No court case. Doesn't matter if you're a citizen or not. You've been designated a terrorist. This impacts everyone. If you just think it's the brown people that are the criminals that it's impacting, got some news for you.
It's truly insane. And by the way, as we've been pointing out, they are often wrong. I want to play this video. It's just heartbreaking if you have it, Colin. This is a woman who's had a green card for 50 years. 50 years. And ICE just detained her anyway. Colin, if you could play that clip.
Immigrated from the Philippines to Hawaii 50 years ago. She graduated from Farrington High School and had been working as a lab technician at the University of Washington. Dixon was returning home to Seattle from a family trip to the Philippines.
And she was there for like a couple weeks, and then she returned February 28th, and she was stuck in customs.
Dixon's niece, Emily Cristobal, says she remained in limbo for 4 days, and then...
When we got the news, I think it was like March 2nd, that she got taken by ICE and then detained in the Northwestern detainment facility. And we haven't been officially been told why she's being held. They just keep saying that they're waiting for documents.
Cristobal is also the office manager for State Representative Tina Grandinetti, who's pushing a bill to provide legal representation for immigrants in Hawaii.
The targeting of our immigrant community is not just something happening on our phones and TV screens. This is a reality that's impacting our staff, our friends, our families, and our loved ones.
In her first term in office, Representative Grandinetti is using her platform to fight the Trump administration's immigration crackdown.
People in the United States are guaranteed the right to counsel under the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution, but that applies only to criminal proceedings. And immigration proceedings are civil proceedings.
Immigration attorneys say green card holders can be deported, but it has to be for cause.
Now we're seeing more and more people who are in detention who are green card holders, and it's usually because of prior convictions.
Cristobal says her aunt didn't become a citizen for family reasons in the Philippines, but has renewed her green card several times. And if her aunt had some kind of record, they would have found it by now.
She had to undergo background checks to work a state job in Washington. So that's kind of the part of like the missing puzzle piece that we don't understand.
Cristobal says Dixon's earliest hearing date will be in July.
It's like her life is here. Like her life is in Washington in the U.S.
Ben Gutierrez, Hawaii News Now.
Meanwhile,
They're also, I reported a couple weeks ago, they were detaining Native Americans, more American than any of us. We're here first. And they detained quite a few Native Americans, sometimes 7, 8, 9 hours, wouldn't give them a phone, wouldn't let them call anyone because they confused them with, I guess another race or another ethnicity. I mean, it's just as Elon just indiscriminately, recklessly, haphazardly just takes his little chainsaw to government programs. It's just the blind leading the
rounding
blind.
up people off the streets and telling them to provide their papers.
Yeah. I mean, it's truly vile. And, I think the reality is Trump has masterfully, and this is not just Trump, by the way. I mean, this has been going on, this kind of darkness in the Republican Party. This has been going on for decades. You had George Wallace, you had Pat Buchanan, the Southern strategy, to blame the other, just find another to turn people's anger, whether it be changing cultural demographics or deindustrialization, changing standard of living for the working class, factories being shut down, your jobs being sent to other countries, all sorts of things. Find someone to blame other than the real culprits, which were the government, basically, and
now
Republicans
AI
and Democrats.
taking our jobs.
And now AI taking your job. But blame the immigrant. Blame the Mexicans, blame the Muslims. Now it's blame the transgender, focus on men and girls sports and all this stuff that is so low on the priority list.
And these ICE agents, they don't get screened. A lot of them join, and I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them join because they want to do this. There is not proper screening. There's not the same screening for ICE that there is for Customs and Border Patrol. There never has been. They do these mass quick hirings, and they hire a bunch of jackbooted thugs. And these guys don't even have to wear uniforms. They don't even have to carry an ID with them. Mahmoud Khalil's wife, she filmed it. She asked them, "Can I see your ID? Who are you? Can you give me your names? We don't have to identify ourselves, ma'am." Excuse me? You're rounding up my husband and you don't have to identify yourself? They rounded up her husband. We don't have to identify ourselves, ma'am. So what? Can anyone just pull up to you and drag you into a freaking van at this point?
It's just crazy. And it's only going to get worse. And, honestly, I think it's going to have diminishing returns politically speaking, because bottom line, a lot of these people out there furious at Doge and at the cuts are Republicans. So even if immigration was number one or issue number two for them, because they've been hoodwinked into thinking this is a bigger, this is taking their jobs and taking their way of life, and, damn those illegals. If your Medicaid's cut or the phone line for Social Security is cut, or if you miss a check, as Donald Trump's billionaire Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said, hey, if Granny and Grandpa, if their Social Security check is delayed by a month, no big deal. My 94-year-old mother-in-law, she wouldn't mind. I don't think those MAGA people are going to be.
Then he went on to say, though, that the people that call in and the people that complain, those will be the real fraudsters. That's how you can see who the real fraudsters are, is the people who call in and tell you that their checks are missing, to intimidate people into not calling in to report that they've not gotten their check. He said the people that cry the loudest are always the fraudsters. Those are the ones that are going to be the ones that are committing the fraud. So, yeah, it's going to affect you. You're going to be labeled a fraudster if you don't get your Social Security check. Even if you're a conservative, they're not going to vet your political affiliations.
Before I move on to the last topic, a few Status Coup public service announcements. Welcome new Status Coup member Derek. Welcome new Status Coup member Dimitriana. Hope I pronounced that right. If you don't know, we are growing. We are expanding. We are at 431,000 subscribers now. Just 6 or 7 months ago, we had just hit 200,000. So we're marching now towards 500,000. And with that, we need to grow our paid membership. If you haven't seen me on as much live the last week or two, I have been interviewing like a maniac because we are interviewing now to hire our first full-time reporter other than me. So I've interviewed today. I interviewed number 13 and number 14 candidate. I was talking to Zeynab before this. I'm probably closing it off because I could keep interviewing people, but I wanted to be thorough, make sure we get the right person, not just for Status Coup, but for you, the viewers. So I'm hoping to have that wrapped up by the end of the week and be able to, hire somebody, have a bunch of good candidates. But obviously hiring a reporter, then we're going to post a job for a full-time producer. All of this costs money. We also want to use different freelancers, including Zeynab, who has been doing more stuff for us. So we need to grow. Obviously, we're growing on YouTube, but we need to be growing with our paid membership too to help fund the on-the-ground reporting. I was out covering the Tesla protest. John Farina was out in D.C. covering the veterans protest. He covered a big protest in New York City against Trump and all these cuts. We've obviously continued covering the Palestine, the ceasefire protest. All of this costs a lot of money, and now hiring a new reporter or producer. We are growing, so we're able to hire those people, but we got to keep growing if we're going to be able to keep everyone. So please support us if you can. StatusCoup.com/join. 16 cents a day. Look at those bags, baby. 16 cents a day. Give me help. StatusCoup.com/join. Oh, I forgot. We just sent Tina to go out and cover the Bernie rally in Vegas. So this stuff doesn't pay for itself. I got to pay Tina. I got to pay her camera person. I got to pay for their travel from LA to Vegas. Got to pay for hotel rooms. Got to pay for their food. Got to pay for, again, Tina and her cameraman. Got to pay Johnny Farina. Got to pay Colin. Got to pay there's a lot of money that needs to go out.
Corporate backers. We do no advertisements during our segments. We're not hawking you guys gold. Gold securities.
Is Jimmy Dore selling gold yet? I heard that. Is Jimmy selling gold yet? Oh my God.
And we're not hawking some kind of pill, some kind of
reverse the vaccine or whatever the fuck they're doing these days.
It's just you guys. That's what keeps us afloat here.
So please, StatusCoup.com/join. You can sign up for as low as $5 a month. Okay. Real quick, I want to get in this topic. So, Zeynab, if we had to guess who has been the most, well, not guess, if we had to decide who's been the most craven, brazen, non-subtle corporate Dem already announcing his 2028 presidential campaign, that would be one Gavin Newsom, who is now, as LA, I guess he's done with LA wildfires, doesn't he have to help with the recovery? There's also a massive lithium battery fire in Northern California we've been covering that's sickening. Hundreds of residents as far as 50 miles away. This was over 2 months ago. People are still sick, chemical burns, nosebleeds, fatigue, headaches, problems breathing.
Right.
Yet he's got time for a podcast to have right-wingers on that he just allows them to launder their lies without challenge them. This is the governor of California, the 5th largest economy in the world. So he's got time for a podcast. And apparently he is now, this is the article from Politico, sending prepaid phones, AKA burners, to tech CEOs. Well, boy, is he meeting this progressive moment. Gavin Newsom is making sure California's business elite could call him. Maybe. Roughly 100 leaders of state-headquartered companies have received a curious package in recent months, a prepaid, inexpensive cell phone, commonly known as a burner, for those of you who haven't seen The Wire or Better Call Saul, programmed with Newsom's digits and accompanied by notes from the governor himself. Quote, "If you ever need anything, I'm a phone call away," read one note to a prominent tech firm CEO printed on official letterhead, along with a hand-scrawled addendum urging the executive to reach out. It was Newsom's idea, representatives said, and had already yielded some, quote, valuable interactions. This arrangement surprised some people Politico spoke with, largely because Newsom is already known as an inveterate texter whose digits live in many business titans' contacts. He's also long been seen as more aligned with business interests than the legislature. It sure seems that way. The proverbial adult in the room when private pillars like Silicon Valley need a sympathetic ear or veto. I love how Politico calls that the adult in the room rather than just a corrupt asshole. But Newsom wanted to convey that he's intent on maintaining California's competitive edge. Phones are still going out. I don't know what the laws in California are on communications. I know there are FOIA laws for email, phone logs. I think text messages are included. Why is Gavin Newsom sending out burner phones to, I don't know, is it Elon Musk? Is it Jeff Bezos? Is it Google CEO?
Hey, CEOs, have a secret conversation with me that can't really be traced back to you.
I mean, that's just so like cartoon corruption. Nothing.
It felt like an Onion article.
I mean, like, I'm not gonna lie. I have used a burner phone. I won't say for what, for reporting, so that certain things can't be traced. But I'm doing it to conceal good things. Like I'm doing it so that certain nefarious actors can't track communications with sources, or a source has used a burner phone. So there are examples of a burner phone being used to conceal a source's identity, to conceal certain things so that corporate America can't get it or the government can't get it. But this is so, I guess, people doing Freedom of Information Acts or can't get access to your texts, or, I mean, why can't they just call you on their phone? I'm sure they have a few if they're billionaire Silicon Valley. The thing is wild. And I want to draw the contrast, Zeynab, because we've been covering it and I'm trying to keep it out there as best I can. He's doing his little podcast. He's now sending burners out there. I mean, this literally sounds like the Onion. While hundreds of people, it might be more than that, in Northern California, Monterey County, California. So we're talking an hour away from San Francisco. Over 2 months after a massive lithium battery fire. If you're new to Status Coup, you might not know about this because the mainstream media has been ignoring this. We haven't. There was a massive lithium battery plant, the world's largest lithium battery storage plant, the world's largest. Over 100,000 lithium batteries burned at this plant in January. It released toxic levels of chemical all over what they call the salad bowl of America, because 70% of our vegetables are produced on the farms right next to this plant. There's also
the equivalent of dozens of chemical bombs.
Shit ton of fruits too. So I've been going to the market, and my wife and I are having trouble finding strawberries because a lot of the strawberry brands like Driscoll's are farmed right there near the plant. And independent test, the EPA, of course, as always, didn't find any problems. But independent testers found elevated levels, high levels of heavy metals contaminating the soil where the vegetables, the fruits are the crops are farmed. So there are people still sick. I'll just show you. This is just from today, looking on the Facebook chat. And I'm posting images. This is a private Facebook group for the Moss Landing. That's the name of the plant. Moss Landing is the area in California where this plant burned. I'm posting 2 images because these are people I've interviewed and I know they wouldn't mind me posting. Colin, if you could put up the first Facebook post I put there. So this is Shiri, 64 days, meaning 64 days after this fire. 64 days being ill, being ignored by the government, writing to the EPA, calling Senator Laird, that's their state senator, contacting Governor Newsom, going to multiple doctor's visits, trying to explain that I'm not crazy, doing research about how to help myself and the community, keeping a symptoms journal to help when we do find someone who could help us, learning about lithium batteries, being disappointed by hearing the effects of nickel, manganese, cobalt on the human body, struggling to breathe, massaging my aching lymph nodes, taking my fluctuating blood pressure, drinking lots of water, getting blood work, having urine tests, waiting on test results, waiting. This is just one woman who had to move. She lived 8 miles away. Fortunately, she had the means, so she moved couple towns over, she's now 15 miles away from where the plant is. She's still having severe symptoms. This is not anecdotal. I have interviewed, and Tina went there on the ground for us. Thanks to you, Status Coup's paying members, funding this kind of reporting. We're talking to dozens of residents, nosebleeds, chemical burns, headaches, dizziness, nausea. I interviewed a pregnant woman who was 1,000 feet from that fire. She's having issues. Her daughter's having issues. Animals are having issues. Colin, let's show the other post. That's where these pictures go with. This is from Jody, who I've interviewed a few times. March 19th, so a few days ago. I went outside today in the yard, and when I came back in, I noticed small bumps all over my hand and down my arm. I assume these are hives. Has anyone broken out with strange small bumps since the fire? Kind of worried. I try to stay inside as much as possible, but went outside a bit more today in the yard, and now this happened. I don't ever get bumps like this. Somebody responded, yep, Mama and I both have. Definitely symptoms from the fire. And I have spoken with people, and I have showed you, the audience, people with chemical burns on their skin. She sent us pictures. It's hard to tell, but she sent us pictures of these small bumps. So you see a little bump there on her hand, little rash. There was another one, I think, Colin. I've thrown 25,000 things at Colin today, so it's fine. So I don't know, Zeynab. There you go. Sounds like a fucking emergency to me. The governor should probably go there. I don't know. Talk to residents. Find out what are you going to do for these folks? Find out you're going to give them access to Medicare. He hasn't declared a disaster, just like Obama didn't declare a disaster in Flint, just like Biden didn't declare a disaster in East Palestine. Newsom, as far as I know, has not requested that President Trump issue a disaster declaration for this. And I don't think Trump will anyway. But to be clear, and everybody that's watching, make sure you understand, this is not only a California story. Let me repeat. This area produces 70% of all American vegetables. Google Salad Bowl of America. If you go to the store and you look on the box that you're getting your kale or your spinach or name your vegetable, a lot of it will say Salinas, California, Castroville, California, Monterey, California, a couple other cities in Northern California. These are all farms near this plant, and there are people as far as 50 to 75 miles away from this plant that are having symptoms 2.5 months later. Gavin Newsom is too busy, cradling Steve Bannon's balls and Charlie Kirk's balls on his podcast, and now sending burner phones to tech executives instead of helping the people.
Where's the burner phones to Vista Energy's employees so that they can report anything suspicious they've seen before or after the fire?
Where's the burner phones to residents so they could contact their governor about their symptoms? Right. We've interviewed residents who their chickens died. Their animals are dying.
He's ignoring, his office are ignoring their phone calls, and he's been ignoring the phone calls from the wildfires for months, 2 months now. He's been ignoring calls. He's been denying entry for people that want to, come in, organizations even that want to come in and speak with him about things to, facilitate communities impacted by the massive forest fires on top of the lithium ion battery. He's been ignoring health organizations that have came to his office trying to speak with him regarding these symptoms. I did see, oddly enough, even an article in the New York Times about this, which kind of blew me away. I mean, they've dropped it since. We're still on it. They've dropped it, and they shouldn't have, but they have. But, Gavin Newsom's ignoring all those people, and then he sends tech CEOs so that they can, their little techno monarchy cities that they want to build, they can call and he can pull some strings and loosen any kind of regs for them so that they can, take over their little Peter Thiel fiefdoms. Is that what this is?
It gets actually worse. Are you ready for this?
Oh, no.
Colin, if you have this article. While he's cradling the balls, I'm sorry to be crass, everyone, but I just love saying it. While he's cradling the balls of Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk and Michael Savage on his little podcast that is not working for him, by the way. People have been criticizing him on the left, and even Normie Dems are criticizing him. As he's sending out burner phones to tech executives, which I don't even know what to say. I don't. Is there like an ethics lawyer in California? Because it seems illegal to me. He's now pushing to ram through another lithium battery plant as Northern California is still reeling from this fire. Governor Newsom announced Wednesday that he has this was last week, has, quote, cut the red tape to speed up work on a Fresno County solar and battery storage project. This comes 2 months after the largest battery storage facility in the country, located in Mass Landing, caught fire and burned for days with possible dangerous smoke concerning nearby. I love possible dangerous smoke. What's the point of even having these local news outlets? Possible dangerous smoke. No, all the residents are just fucking, totally making up the symptoms. They're all hypochondriacs. They're faking the nosebleeds. It's all psychosomatic. Possible dangerous smoke. Get the fuck out of here. Newsom said he was going to, quote, streamline the process for legal challenges that could cause long delays. In California, we're in the how business. We're moving fast to achieve our world-leading clean energy. I can't read this anymore. And to be clear,
great. So it's the Ezra Klein abundance philosophy that we've seen circling around, on which I'm doing a piece on Wednesday. It's basically gut all in any kind of, and the Democratic Party is now pitching this too, but gut all regulation. It's Reaganomics 2.0. It's like neocon gone wild, and it's trickle down economics. But this is what the burner phones are about, Jordan.
But I just want to be clear, because this fire, and if you're new to this story, there was the original fire that went on for days in January. And with lithium battery, if it burns, the fire department can't put it out. Lithium is reactive to water. So all you could do is let it burn. So that smoke, which released hydrogen fluoride, which is a very toxic gas, I don't give a fuck what the EPA says. They claimed, we're not seeing it in the air. Well, the people's symptoms, hazardous waste experts I spoke with, and a former fire chief I interviewed said the symptoms residents are having match exposure to high levels of hydrogen fluoride, which is a toxic gas that at high levels can kill you and can give you cancer. So not only was there the original fire in January, it reignited a month later in February. So they've been exposed now twice. And even if the fire is technically out, the damage is done. It was in the air for days and days and days, and it's in the soil. So this guy, to repeat, I don't want to weaponize clean energy, because a lot of people have looked at this story and tried to exploit it to be against solar and wind and electric vehicles. There is good and bad with all energy. With lithium and electric vehicles, there are bads attached to it, including where they are made. Go Google lithium batteries and the Congo, and basically slave labor to make these. There is bad in terms of if they burn, and they're typically burning from overheating. Water, it's reactive to water. Water cannot put out the fire. So, for example, these Tesla protests where people are burning the Teslas, you might not think about this, but there's some toxic shit being released from those Teslas if you're burning it. All electric vehicles, because they're made with lithium ion batteries. So it's there. I think it's better than fossil fuels, but if your response to this fire at the world's largest lithium battery storage that has sickened people as far as 50 to 75 miles away, which, by the way, Newsom helped ram this plant in in Northern
Weren't there
California.
already warnings, Jordan? Didn't we report on warnings when this plant was being built that the facility wasn't properly scaled and properly organized, and the potential hazard for a fire starting more than once?
There
Didn't
was
we?
three. There were
I
3
think
fires.
we
Yes.
reported that, didn't we?
Yeah, and there were 3 fires before this one in January. So I'm not saying don't push electric vehicles. There are other technologies other than lithium batteries that are being found to be safer. But the fact that the governor is doing a podcast and sending burner phones to his tech feudalist bros instead of being on the ground as an emergency responder like he was for the LA wildfires for this Northern California lithium, because this isn't only California. It affects all of our most of our vegetables and a lot of our fruits. And now he's trying to ram through another one. Well, if they're trying to ram through another one, do they have an emergency response plan? Because they certainly didn't have a competent one here. Do they have a way to put out the fire rather than just let it burn? Because that was the only thing they could do here. Where are they putting this new factory? It's
What
certainly not going to.
regulations is he making exceptions for? Is he going to tell anyone?
So this is not about, this is not about fossil fuels versus clean energy, because most common sense people would say we're all for clean energy. And there's a whole lot of mines and refineries and fossil fuel and chemical plants and plastics factories that are very dangerous and have been exploding and releasing all sorts of toxic shit. But the bottom line is, where are you putting these plants? What are the safety protocols? What are the regulations being put in place? And are they being followed? And do you have an emergency plan? And if there is a disaster, what is the government response? Because the problem here is the only time you could get a disaster declaration declared is for hurricanes, is for tornadoes, is for natural disasters. And that's because of a law called the Stafford Act, which has said that Republicans, by the way, push for because it gave states' rights, meaning the federal government can't just come in and take over the response because the Republicans want states' rights. Well, this also meant if it's a non-natural disaster, if it's a man-made disaster like Flint and East Palestine and Northern California, Moss Landing, you can't, by the letter of the law, you can't declare it a disaster. You could only do a state of emergency. And the difference is state of emergency, you could get some resources from the federal government, but the federal government can't take over the response. If you get a disaster,
less investigations, it limits federal investigations into what happened.
So if you get a disaster declaration, the feds could take over, FEMA could go in, the Army Corps of Engineers could go in, and you could get access, if you need health care, to Medicare or Medicaid. They're not issuing a disaster declaration. So I got news for you. If it's Gavin Newsom, and I'm sure the same people doing rah-rah for Bernie and AOC now, they will come back home. They will be pushing Pete and Gavin. We will be reminding the masses every single day of the week and twice on Sunday that Gavin Newsom is a dime a dozen corrupt fuck, just like the rest of them, with better hair and a better smile. Okay? But we are not going to let this go. And to the people in Northern California, we're going to try and stay on this, just like we've stayed on Flint, East Palestine, like Kalamazoo, Michigan. We've covered that graphic packaging releasing toxic levels of gas. Conyers, Georgia, had the biolab fire that released chlorine gas into the air. We're trying to cover and stay on as much as we can, but we need help, which is why we're looking to hire the next reporter. Okay, Zeynab.
Seems like there needs to be some mass organizing against California's very own American psycho Patrick Bateman, meaning Gavin Newsom.
Absolutely. So it would be nice. I'm glad that, lefties and even some normies are lashing out at Gavin Newsom and his disgusting podcast. But maybe we could point out the fact that he's letting the people of Northern California slowly die and get sicker because of a toxic chemical shroom that enveloped them, and they're still sick. Zeynab, if you could take it from here, I got to go take care of the little one. We will read your super chats. But Zeynab will take it from here. Thank you. We'll be back at it tomorrow. And thank you to new members. Before I go, I implore you, I beg of you, sign up. Do you see CNN, MSNBC, TYT, other independent outlets, you see them out there as much as we do? I don't fucking think so. StatusCoup.com/join. I am not beyond begging. I will beg you before I ever beg an advertiser or the corporate vultures purchasing our government. Please support us. StatusCoup.com/join. Take it from here.
All right. I guess we'll be moving on to super chats then. What do we have, Colin? We got any? Got anyone that wants to say hello or has any questions? We're at the point where you have to be, and this is from Denise Columbia. Thank you so much, Denise. We're at the point where you have to be deliberately obtuse to miss the push me, pull you duopoly government we've got. That's right. Oligarchy sucks. And that is exactly what happens. It is a constant push and pull, and it is these media outlets going with the wind of whatever is popular at the moment to pull you back into the establishment. And it is always, always, always to quell protest, to quell dissent, to quell boycotts and those kinds of things when they're effective. It just is. This has been happening for 50 years or more. 50 years, way before that. Okay. Yeah, it's been happening forever. Member for 36 months, Tony D. Thank you so much, Tony. It's so good to see you. Fight the power. Oh, that's your level. Okay, sorry. I'm just reading things on the screen at this point. Sorry about that. Jordan and Zeynab, my fave duo here. It's only been 2 months, and I don't think this country can survive 4 years of this fascism. That's true. It's a water hose, and Gavin Newsom's friend Steve Bannon told us that's the whole point, is to overwhelm us so that things slip through the cracks. And one of the things we've been doing here is trying to keep an eye on what the mainstream media is missing so that it doesn't slip through the cracks, and trying to do our best to keep you updated on things that, you know, might be overlooked, but can affect us all. Christina Suazo. Thank you so much, Christina. Where were the Bernie supporters in 2016? That's a good question. Well, there were thousands. West Virginia's primary went to Bernie. A lot of primaries went to Bernie, but that's a whole can of that's a whole can of worms. But that is a good question. Tony D. I just heard MSNBC call Bernie and AOC out of touch with Middle America. To heck with MSNBC. F MSNBC. Well, there's many, many reasons you can say that. And I don't think that MSNBC understands the policies that most middle Americans actually want, because they're elite and out of touch. Madavago, thank you so much. What about the rights of that little girl, Dirty Harry? Oh man, I haven't thought about that movie in a long time. But that's kind of the logic that we have. It is definitely, but it's not one rogue individual. It's a state acting with impunity. John Trevina. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate your reporting, even if I don't agree with you on Bernie not saying he doesn't care, saying he's weak, effectively same thing. Not saying he doesn't care, saying he's weak, effectively the same thing. Okay. Thank you so much, John. Tony D. I remember the DNC calling students terrorists. Yes. It was the DNC as well as the RNC. They were completely aligned on maligning pro-Palestine, anti-genocide protesters. Perry Stein, we know the duopoly is fascist. We should concentrate on reporting on efforts to change the situation, like what Sama Shawant did in Seattle. That is true. And if you wanted to, we did a segment yesterday about how, just like she did, people can run independent of the parties. It was a segment I worked on. But there's definitely what Jordan always talks about, and that is local organizing locally for our needs. Economic boycotts, economic pressures is where we need to go. Union and labor organizing, even though unions are only at 8%, there are types of labor organizing we can all do. And I know it's difficult, but there's things that we can figure out. Mutual aid. And then, of course, electorally, when we get there, still a ways off, and there's a whole hell of a lot to focus on right now, but people can run independent, can run outside of the duopoly. And like I mentioned before, 70% of seats were uncontested last cycle, so people don't have a choice. If you give them one, there's a good likelihood that candidate can slip through the door and become a representative, whether it's the school board or all the way up to, state house or Congress.
What? That's
and I
awful.
think one more may have come in for us.
Oh, let me grab that.
What do y'all do for self-care? Let's see. Perry Stein. Oh, no.
No, I clicked the wrong one. Sorry.
Oh, five alarm fire, I think is the.
There it is.
Thank you. See, 5 alarm fire. Thank you so much. What do y'all do for self-care? Please take care of yourselves. Hello from Frankfurt. A fellow Kentucky native. I love to see folks from my beautiful Appalachian state. What do I do for self-care? Log offline, because we do have to look for news, hug my kid, watch a stupid movie. I love to cook, so I cook even though I don't have a whole lot of, I'm poor, but I take a walk, I take those kinds of things, find those small joys, when I can right now. And remember, I think one of the biggest things that I tell myself a lot is what we see online. If you go on Twitter, you're going to feel like the whole world has gone absolutely insane. These algorithms that we're fed, remember that more of us agree than don't, that more people have humanity than what we're seeing don't, that there's a lot more empathy out there than what it feels like on social media, and that these algorithms are deceiving. So it's good to go out around family, friends, do what you can to remind yourself of that and to kind of touch that. And I think that's part of at least that's what I do. That helps me. But thank you so much. And I think that wraps us up, and I appreciate everyone that gave super chats. If you can, please go to Status Coup /info. Do you have the where they can donate to for us, Colin? Thank you. StatusCoup.com/join to become a member. It's only 16 cents a day. Like Jordan said, $5 a month. Please sign up and help us out. And please check out the videos that we released this weekend. Tina was on the ground. Jordan did a segment earlier today. We've got a lot of other things going on, and please tune in next time. It was good seeing everybody.